Hey everybody, good to see you all again. I'm Thomas Mironi, Associate Art Director for Star Trek Online, and welcome to the Art of Star Trek Picard from the Keel Out, our final panel here on Admiralty Day and our final big event for Fleet Week. We're so happy and grateful that you could all join us for this amazing day with these amazing panelists, and we're so grateful to all of our community members across Streampunks and Star Trek Adventures and Star Trek Online who did some amazing streams all week and really just got in the spirit of celebrating our other favorite Star Trek characters, the starships. So without further ado, we're joined by some really great guests for this panel, and I want to go ahead and have you all introduce yourselves. And so we'll start with Brian. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and what you did for and do for Star Trek Picard?
Hi, my name is Brian Tatosky. I'm a visual effects supervisor for CBS, and I had just finished working on seasons 2 and 3 of Star Trek Picard, and I'm currently working on Star Trek Discovery and Strange New Worlds.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. And we'll move it over to Andrew. What was your role on Picard?
Sure. I'm Andrew Jarvis. I'm a UI designer for film and television. So I did the computer screens, animation, and design for all 3 seasons. In the team with Twisted Media, Noah Schwass, Chris Kiefer, a lot of people contributed to the screen graphics for that show. Everywhere you look, there's graphics.
Yep. Andrew, I don't know, you probably knew this, but I mean, it's funny. You're definitely a man after my heart because I got my start on Star Trek Online working on the user interface, doing it in the LCAR style. So it's really cool, all the work that you did, bringing that back into Star Trek for Picard. It really helps tie the universe together, and just like the rug and the Big Lebowski. But no, it's tremendous, and it's cool, and we're going to talk about that more. And then,
Sure.
but I have to get over to the man, the myth, legend, John Eves. We are thrilled to have you here for a second panel today. But just in case people missed the ship design panel earlier, why don't you tell us about yourself?
All right, Johnny Hughes. I think they hire me because I'm cheap and I make coffee. But no, it's been fun. I've been on the show now since 1989 in various forms, and so it's been as a fan, it's been like a dream come true to keep working on Star Trek and keep getting hired to work on Star Trek. So met some of the most amazingly, wonderfully talented people. So I think that's the best thing about Star Trek is the crew. And the next best thing is getting to draw ships all day. So it's fun. I'm a hands-on artist, so they still hire me to do sketches and then take them to the point where CG modelers take over, and then I do paint overs on top of those ships after that. And so that's kind of the way it goes. And get to branch off into alien ships a lot of sets and props. So it's a very, very fun world. So I get to kind of tool around in just about every department. So lots of fun, good times.
Awesome. Yeah. And you say it's a fun world, and that really is what everybody here does, right? Is a part of the world building, whether it's the externals of the ships or the interiors of the ships. So Andrew, I want to talk to you about all of the UI or fake UI, or I've seen it written as like FUI,
Sure.
like FUI. That you did for Picard, and kind of where did you start, when you learned that, oh, you're going to be doing the interfaces for this new Star Trek show?
Yeah. I love that acronym because the F could be whatever you fictional, fake, future,
right.
fantasy. But yeah, as an FUI artist, right? I remember I actually had to go back and find the email. In 2015, okay, there was complete Star Trek drought, right? No one had seen Star Trek for a while. There were rumors that there was going to be a new show, and I found the email. I said, "Star Trek, anyone? Do we have an in with this Alex Kurtzman?" because there was talk of this new Star Trek show, which of course would become Discovery, and we were invited to prepare some samples for that. And so they kind of looked around and said, all right, who's like the biggest Star Trek fan? I'm like, right here. And they said, all right, go for it. And we were kind of between shows at the time. And so or at least we weren't so slammed that I could spend a whole week kind of throwing things at the wall and really delving into it. I had been a big Star Trek fan. I had all, technical manuals and whatnot, but not all, right? So I took that moment to kind of catch up, right? Like I went on eBay, I found everything that I didn't already have, and I just started poring over manuals and making little elements about warp drive and researching how all that worked. And ultimately we didn't get it because it ended up being done in Canada, and just the way it worked, we couldn't work on it. But I had already sort of done a bit of R&D when Star Trek Picard was announced season 1, and we got it. And they said, all right, yeah, you're working on it. So I was able to pull all that stuff that I had already sort of been tooling around on. And now but the one thing in 2015, your arms kind of tied behind your back, because you said, what's the most iconic interface in Star Trek?
Right.
It's LCARS. Right. But you can't use LCARS for Discovery, right? I knew the time period of Discovery. So I was purposely really trying to tie it more to like Enterprise and what's called SCOMs, right? The Enterprise interface. But now I could actually work on LCARS, which was like, oh, okay, let's go. And so this was right after my 40th birthday. I remember it was that someone, the reason I remember is somebody came up to me and was like, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, I'm going to start working on Star Trek. And so I really I dove into that and really just like shapes and colors, right? And so that was season 1. A lot of holograms, and it kind of threw me for a loop once we got into it and delivering graphics. It really became about the Serena and the Romulan interfaces on the cube, right? And so it wasn't until season 2 that we really got to see a lot of LCARS. And so what had been developed in season 1, which was really only seen in Picard's study, the holodeck on the Serena, we have a beautiful shot coming through and him seeing his face superimposed with the Borg implants. There was that scene, and there was a scene in I guess his Admiral O's office?
Commodore O, yeah.
Commodore. Oh, there you go. So that's all we've done so far. So then it really became, okay, let's take these scraps and really develop into something you could fill an entire bridge of a starship with. And that really became a big look development project. Chris Kiefer was working with us there. He was on the team at Twisted Media. And
uh-oh. We got a little connection hiccup.
Andrew's frozen.
I'll type that in chat while we try to recover Andrew. I do want to toss over to you, Brian, and we're talking about the kind of what the LCARs and how important. Oh, here we go. I think he's coming back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. That was strange. Thanks, teams. Anyway.
Sorry about that. Mike, we might need you to rearrange things a little bit. So go ahead. You go ahead and pick up where
Well, so that was so the look development phase. Really, we knew it was the Stargazer, and that was incredibly meaningful to me. Picard's first ship. I have fond memories of actually seeing the battle live. It was one of the few TNG episodes I actually saw live as a kid. And just to say, okay, yeah, that thing, that memory you have of being at Uncle house, and saw that episode, and I remember thinking just how freaking cool it was that I was watching these movies on VHS of the original cast films, and they had their bridges were filled with the blue and green, you know? And here was TNG, and you've got the L-cars, but when they went back to that ship, to the Stargazer in the battle, it was all blue and green. And that consistency, that notion that this is all the same universe, was so evocative to me. And that was one of the things that immediately started to make me a super fan, was that this isn't just a fun, entertaining thing, but it's a really like generation sprawling adventure, like space opera. And that when you have times and you go back to something like the episode Relics, and you see Scotty's shuttlecraft, and that's got the blue and green interface, I said, that was really cool to me. And to know that a lot of that consistency actually came from one man, from Michael Okuda, that he was kind of the guy going, at least a lot of times I know he was there going like, no, this should be this should be that he would be the keeper of the canon, right? Well, imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I'm on this Zoom with him for the look development process for the Stargazer. Casey Felt, who was the coordinator / project manager for Twisted Media, Chris Kiefer, and myself met with Michael Okuda early on, and just getting pearls of wisdom, showing him what we'd done so far. That was really thrilling. But he was working on For All Mankind season 3 at the time, so he couldn't quite roll up his sleeves and throw in, so to speak. That actually started to materialize in season 3. And we could talk about that later or not, because I know we avoid too much about season 3, but I will say that it was a long haul. It was a long, we shot seasons 2 and 3 concurrently. All of you who worked on it can attest that it was a lot. And so having, and we're a pretty small team. Myself and Noah, I often sort of make the comparison that we were like rowing partners. We would get up in the morning, and it was like, damage report. We had a lot of early mornings and a lot of late nights, and so it was for somebody like a fan like me for whom it meant so much to get it right. I couldn't just bust out a screen the way I could on other shows. This was something that I wanted to make sure I took my time with and got right. Unfortunately, Star Trek isn't often made that way, with extra time to really noodle around and get it right. And so it was very much like, I want to paint the Sistine Chapel, but right now I actually need to be a short order cook. And so being that short order cook and busting out graphics as they're needed was taxing. And when season 3 of For All Mankind finally sort of cleared up and Michael Okuda became available, it was so great having him there as a third hand, to say like, and so he started working ahead. He started working weeks and sometimes almost a month ahead, and say, all right, here are the graphics we need. You don't have time to work on because you're working on what plays tomorrow. Right. That's changed, Yeah. And yeah, so that was really helpful. We got another third hand. Seth Molson joined us for season 3 as well. So yeah, I think I could literally talk for another half hour straight.
Yeah, well, I do want to go back to you in a bit, because I think we had a conversation and you mentioned in camera UI versus post UI and stuff. So we'll go back to that in a second, but I want to switch over to Brian, because talking about the filling out the world and the consistency of the world. I mean, the exterior of the ships that's a really big part of that too, right? So, and I think you were around at the end of season 1, and so can you explain kind of your experiences there and how that led into what you all did for season 2 with all the effect shots with the fleet?
Sure, yeah. I mean, season 1, I worked for a visual effects company. Their name is DNEG. They're throughout the world. They do Academy Award-winning work, and they were lucky enough to work on season 1 of Picard as a vendor. So, you know, been a Star Trek fan since I was little, watching it on KCOP Channel 13 in Los Angeles. And kind of to pivot off of what Andrew said is when you get a chance to work on these things, you know, you're part of a larger thing. You're part of this history that you want to honor and do your little part of as best as you can. So I was lucky enough to be able to come on to the CBS side to work on seasons 2 and 3. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure to, you know, do a better job at, let's just put it that way. Dave Blass, production designer, wanted to make sure that we filled that universe with more of a continuity of ships and to put in, you know, basically to get in as many ships as we could, new and old, things that fit with the next generation universe, things that honor the next generation universe in all of the new stuff that we're building, and just, you know, help fill out that universe for the other seasons, especially now that we're more in space in season 2. We've got more in the beginning and ending. We're seeing more of Starfleet than we've seen in these seasons. We'll see even more in season 3, but it's you know, you want to see Starfleet and Starfleet. So we worked on new designs, and John and Doug Drexler, Dave Blass came up with, and just to back up for a second, the process is the EPs talk to the production designer in the art department based on scripts as to what ships that they're going to need. If there's a hero ship, they might have very specific ideas on what that hero ship is and what it should look like. If it's other kind of more fleet ships, there's more flexibility. They may be okay with using a type of ship that we've seen before, or they may want a new design. So they start that conversation with the art department and with the production designers. And then, like I said, they talk to John, they talk to Doug Drexler, they start to flesh out what those ships should look like. So we're in contact with them as they're drawing those things out, either in 2D. Sometimes they may make massing models and previs types of things in 3D that they can then hand over to us. And, you know, we'll ask for a lot of 2D reference. There's charts where they call out all the little bits and pieces to make sure that everybody knows where the tractor beam emitters are located, or where the transporter, you know, interfaces are on the outside of the ships, to make sure that we get all of those details in our final model. But once the art department has sort of gotten something approved with the EPs of the show and a design that they like and they're happy with, at least in 2D, you know, sort of the architects are done, and then the contractors come in, and then we start actually getting it built. So once the architectures have given us our designs, then we go out and we work with our vendors who build the actual ships themselves, and mostly in Maya, which is a 3D program. There's more details than that, but we'll make this the fast version. They give us those pieces, and first we'll have an untextured version that we can look at, so we can decide if that's really capturing in 3D sort of what they wanted out of the 2D drawings. Because once you get it dimensional, you start looking at it at different angles, because all of the ships are characters. The ships are characters as much as anybody in the show. They have angles that you like to feature them in. They got angles that you need to avoid. You know, they have a personality and a language to how they move, where they look best, and that sort of thing. The thing that's always been exciting about like John's models and things is like he captures the best looking ship design at the best looking angle that makes you just slobber and fall in love with that design. So then our job is to make sure that we get as much of that into the 3D thing that actually shows up in the shots as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And, you know, you'll go back and forth until finally you get something that, if you're not 100% happy with, you've usually run out of time anyway. So you have to get it into shots, and you need to start working on it. So, you know, and that's the basic part of the process. So it's exciting to, take part in this bigger scheme of things. And for the case of the Star Trek Online ships, we were super excited that Dave had reached out to Cryptic and reached out to Thomas, because we need more ships than we can afford, basically. That's the short end of it. We would want 10,000 ships and 10,000 classes, and we would pack in everything that we possibly could. We don't have time to design all those and build them ourselves. We don't, So it's exciting, the fact that, like, there's these dang good ships out there. Some of them are fantastic and beautiful, and it's like, why not just kind of join forces in the different, realms of the Star Trek world and start fleshing out and making the whole universe deeper by using some of those things.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciated the opportunity, and we're overjoyed and so excited to be able to contribute in that way. And you said something about the ship being in character, and there was a major new character that was introduced with Star Trek Picard season 2, and that was, of course, the gorgeous Sagan class USS Stargazer. So I want to kick it over to John, because this is old hat for you by now, right? Designing a Star Trek hero ship. This is probably the what is this, the fourth or fifth one that you've done that's kind of at the center of a Star Trek production, between you did the Discovery, the Stargazer now, you did the Enterprise B, the Enterprise E, and obviously the Enterprise that's in Strange New Worlds. So but when you're tasked with this, where do you go to say, well, this has to be something new?
It's very interesting, especially with the hero ships. Like you were saying, they don't come around that often, but when they do, you're like beyond excited until you think about it overnight, and then the next it's pure horror. Where do you approach these things? And the Stargazer was one of the things that we didn't talk about when we were talking earlier about starship design. Is budget makes an incredibly large hand in the design process. For the Stargazer, for example, we were immediately pulling out the original Stargazer and trying to revamp around that original design, yet bring it into the TNG era. And so there were mentions about the observation lounge and looking out the back. And so we tried to do it with the big sweeping nacelles in the background so you could see them in beautiful stars and all that stuff. And budgetary reasons why it's an optical whenever you look out that screen. It's actually a very expensive process, even though it looks fairly simple. And one of the notes came to go, is there any way we could build something outside that window so you don't see stars and it's not optical? And so that completely changed the design aspects of what the Stargazer was going to be, because the original was like two T-posts and the nacelles jet off of those, and you can see all around it. And so we had to kind of design a new ship that had Stargazer elements, yet was TNG and influenced by these budget concerns. And so we did variations on the ship, many variations on. Dave Blass was kind of the head of the thing. So we did round saucer, which Terry Metalis, the producer, or the line producer is. He loves round saucers. He comes from a love for the retrofit ship. And so we thought, well, what if we ovalate it just a little bit, not like sovereign length, but just enough to throw it in the TNG world. So we like that. And then the nacelles have been like the biggest design issue since Discovery. We've spent more time designing nacelles than ships themselves, and trying to get that nacelle nailed that the producers like is about the hardest element there is. But it's just wonderful doing these things. And Doug Drexler and I had worked together on Deep Space Nine. That was our first show. And the first ship we did was the Breen ship. And working together is just a beyond wonderful experience. He's goofy and cracks jokes all day long, and I do the same. So, but working together, he can take the sketches and add the Star Trek lore that needs to be there. So working with him, and the same with Scott Schneider, he was a model maker. We worked together, and we got to do the Discovery Enterprise together. So to have those pencil sketches while the CG is going on at the same time is such a wonderful working environment. And then having Dave Blass as a part of it really is a wonderful thing. And bringing you guys in, Bill Krause in, and it was just a wonderful experience the way these designs come together. But like I said, they always start with pencil, and you just do hundreds and hundreds of sketches, and they pick this, they pick that, they pick this, and you merge it all together. And what's funny is we've been doing Star Trek for so long, like you're saying, that we needed new ships. And so as Brian was mentioning, that they got to bring in your stuff with the cryptic stuff. There's so much stuff online. Dave will come to me with the drawing. He goes, "Did you do this ship?" And I go, "Yeah, that was a reject from a Perpetual game before Cryptic took it."
Yeah,
and he goes, it's TNG area. What do you say we revamp that? It's like hot dog. It's like, it's so fun that you get to take old things that you love that didn't make it and revamp them for the new shows as well. So it's this wonderful, big, gigantic library of things you can pick and choose from the past and create new stuff. So, and then once it gets into your guys' hands, the magic begins. So,
yeah, I want to come back to that event at some point because I want to talk a little bit about the Excelsior too as well, because that was another kind of modernized throwback that I think struck a lot of people. I knew that I thought it was super cool, but let's switch gears back to the LCARs for a minute because I want to talk to Andrew. And this is actually there is a bit more of a more elegant segue here in the sense of taking something like the Stargazer or the Excelsior and modernize it, right? And you're doing that with LCARs, which is from the 80s. So I want you to talk very specifically about the kind of things you did to bring LCARs into, a modern, the kind of vocabulary of modern show, and then also talk about the idea between like in-camera UI that you mentioned, like on real screens, right? Versus, I know some of that's done in post. So I'm really curious about all that.
I think that like fictional user interface design is very different from real user interface design. It follows totally different trends. It has totally different goals. I came from a web development background, and so like learning what communicates to an audience, this is very complicated, right? And 9 times out of 10, that's one of the main things we're trying to communicate, right? That the people using this are very smart, and they're from the future. They understand things that you don't, and so there is a big emphasis on density, right? And just as an artist, like leaving aside the whole concept of design, which is really the process of simplification, right? As an artist, though, I love things like the Sistine Chapel. They're just like mind-breakingly complicated and dense with detail. And that's the kind of thing that, as an artist, I like. Now, if I'm a user, like pulling up my cell phone and going through it, I kind of want it to be as simple as possible because I want to get to what I'm doing, right? You listen to Michael Okuda talk about the process of designing LCARs. He says that it should appear very simple, right? That it should appear to have an amazing amount of detail and be very complicated, but be very simple for the users. So I definitely came from this school of, I'd probably been designing user interface for film and television for about 5 years at that point. And so I definitely had that style of more is more density, and a lot of all singing, all dancing, like everything kind of. And so going into LCARs, I sort of, oh my God, here on one hand, I know that I need to make it more complicated in a sense to sort of show that increase in technology, right? But the fact that we're going forward many decades, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just complicated for complicated's sake. So I kind of tried to give myself a bit of a minimalist cleanse, and try to start like I did a few Illustrator files that were just starting from the simplest shapes that were still recognizable as LCARs, and then add a little bit more, and then add a little bit more until I've gone too far, and then step backwards. But yeah, And then in terms of what is being captured in camera versus what is composite in post, I mean, that will always sort of be my to have walked the path that all of these greats have walked, of sort of chasing after a production on like a shooting schedule. I feel very honored to have done so, but I don't look forward to doing it again. I wear my Star Trek Picard playback T-shirt proudly. All of those guys, I even wrote down names because I did not want to forget them. Not like I ever would. Andrew Miller and Rick Kahn were like the boots on the ground that would be like loading graphics up, on the day. They come in the morning, the director starts blocking the shot, and things that you had prepared for weeks and hours and hours and hours, perhaps 100 hours might have gone into a graphic. On the day when they go to block it and the director goes, yeah, remember that graphic we were going to show you there? Let's actually put it on that iPad. Okay, wow, we're exporting an IPA file this morning. All right.
Oh my goodness.
It's like I said, it's like you wake up and it's like damage report. How many things they changed? What things that we've been preparing for weeks are now suddenly up in the air? I think that ultimately a UI designer for film and television can do their best work in post. I hate to say it, but it's true. I think that, like, as much, you want to give the actor something to act to. You want to give the camera interactive lighting. You want to give the director the sense that they are now stepping onto the bridge of a Federation starship. How freaking cool is that? Like, that we're actually making Federation starships. But at the end of the day, if you want it to look the best that it could possibly be, let me composite it in post. And it wasn't that wasn't the show we were on. And I don't think Star Trek is usually made that way either. I think most of Okuda's work, and we go back to backlit panels, obviously. I mean, and that was actually people were sick of hearing me say, like, let's do it as translates. Let's do it as backlit panels the way they did back in the day. And then any kind of animation we'll do in post. That way you get the exact look that they had on the TNG bridge, that they had on all of these bridges. I was just watching Deep Space Nine the other day, and I saw a beautiful panel in it was towards the end of Deep Space Nine. It was a Cardassian outpost or something. And it was like beautiful, shiny black glass, and you could see how glossy, and I love the look of translates. At the end of the day, the most budget conscious and the most just production conscious way of doing it was to have video displays behind glass and have them fed with graphics, which is a much more labor intensive way of doing it. But I'm quite proud of what we got in camera, and obviously those big curved displays. They were a bit of a Frankenstein between projectors. I think there were 4 projectors, and then there were like 2 HD monitors, and then like 4 4K monitors. So it was a real combination of different graphics, and every one of those display devices required a different input. So we needed to output a different part. So it was like a big puzzle that you need to output different graphics for. And 8 graphics files later, you've got the full picture.
So just to make sure I've got it straight, you're talking, so when you say playback, that means that you do the graphics beforehand and you're playing it on the set, right? When they shoot the scene, and then in post you're actually just compositing it after the fact.
Andrew doesn't give himself and Twisted enough credit for how good the stuff looks on set. There's something about being on set when Todd Marks and Larry turn on the projectors and you see all of those things light up and start animating, that not only looks fantastic, it helps the actors, and also they have stuff that's interactive, that's on pads and on insets, so that when you actually press a button, the buttons actually do light up. You can actually, pull the transporter controls and they actually move. That helps
Wow.
the actors an amazing amount to have that interactivity in there, and it looks good. And yes, we're there in our 12-hour rush days, and the director suddenly decides that the graphic that's over here needs to be shifted over to the left, and that may be something that they can actually do or they actually can't do because things are set up. And that's the sort of thing where post starts to come in. In general, the idea would be that the stuff that was put in post afterwards would be like hologram type of interfaces where there isn't actually anything to do on the set and stuff. You hope in the best worlds that, what's on those displays on the day is what's going to work. Sometimes story elements change and get tweaked and stuff, so you have to adjust little things. And like I said, sometimes it's just that particular camera angle that we thought was going to work great just doesn't, so things have to be moved around. And that's sort of where we start to get involved in putting stuff in post. But there's nothing like the real thing on set. And there's for actors, especially for capturing those great camera angles and things that have lovely depth of field and stuff that you may not have quite to that realistic detail through a camera lens afterwards. So like I said,
it's
his team at Twisted, he's not giving himself quite enough credit for how good stuff looks.
Yeah, it does look a phenomenal. I mean, you see the Stargazer bridge on screen, and you're immediately transported to that how you felt seeing the Enterprise and the Fire and the Voyager. I think you all nailed that 24th, late 24th, early 25th century vibe, for lack of a better word.
It's one of those things, like Andrew was saying, you want to honor the stuff that's in the past and the design, but see where would it go forward if we were at this time period? And ultimately something that the third head of the Hydra that he didn't quite mention is that if you're seeing the interface, there's a story point that they want to sell. So ultimately, his UI has to be about selling story points on top of looking complex and honoring the past. So he's got an additional problem or issue that he needs to be concerned about because, again, it comes down to, is this selling the moment? Is this getting the most drama out of the moment? Is this telling the story so that the viewers understand what's happening in the shortest amount of visuals possible? So, that's another deal. When we start putting in holograms and the holograms have interfaces and things, it's like, how do we tell the story most impactfully that still fits in the Star Trek universe, but ultimately it's story. So how do we sell that visual in the least amount of time, least amount of shots, least complex way possible?
Yeah. Well, and you have to do that with the effect shots for the ships too. When you're introducing a ship for the first time, like the Stargazer, or the Excelsior or whatever, you make choices about framing and composition and stuff, and also scale and texture, and that's really important for the Borg ship. So actually, I kind of was curious if you wanted to talk about bringing that Borg ship to life, because it was so cool seeing it. You saw like these doors open up, at some point. Like, can you talk about that ship for a little bit?
Yeah, the Borg Queen ship is a fantastic design, and it's kind of exciting because it's 100% Borg, but it's also a new thing that, for story reasons, we understand only at the very end kind of why it's a new thing. But ultimately, always with the Borg, it's about selling scale. It's like, how do you make sure that people realize that this is a massive ship, and that you put in enough detail and you put in enough little bits that you understand this is massive, but then it just doesn't become a mess where you just can't tell what's going on, or it's just kind of just a gray field of nernies out there. So, how do you light it in a way that's most dramatic to sell the shots? In this case, the ship's mysterious. We're not quite sure what a deal is until the very end. It's as good as it bad. Is it something completely different? So every time you look at a shot, you're thinking, okay, how do I amp up the drama in this? How do I make it more mysterious when it needs to be mysterious for a ship, in the Borg ships in particular? How do we point the camera so it looks as menacing as possible when it needs to be menacing? The Stargazer is a beautiful ship. It's just it's a fantastic upgrade of the original design, but also completely stands on its own. Like if you didn't see the old ship, you could still look at this new one and think that it's beautiful. And then how do you contrast that versus something like the Borg ship?
Right.
So, it's an awesome ship. It's the top of the line, but then also you have to make sure that it gets dwarfed by the Borg ship. So we're always looking for ways in lighting, in the way that we move the lights around the ship, where we put the lights to kind of emphasize all that. And it really starts with the original designs from the 2D design and kind of always moves forward from there.
Yeah. Well, and the lighting, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is really powerful when you see that green menacing glow. It totally washes the whole scene, right? And you're like, oh man, like it really adds a kind of a menace to the situation that you wouldn't have if that lighting weren't there. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, one of the things that we're able to do more nowadays with just having more powerful machines to do 3D rendering and stuff, and have a lot more interactive light from ship to ship, from stars or nebulas onto ships and things. So we really tried to look for realistic but also dramatic ways to light the ships with interactive lighting, because it makes a difference. It's part of the style of sort of the new Trek shows as well. But even without that, it just makes the ships look more realistic and better, more integrated into the scenes, more integrated into each other. When you see those Bassard collectors and the kind of glow and some of that is reflected on the ship itself, it just looks cooler.
Right.
So that's totally. Ultimately the real reason why I want it in there, but it helps tell the story better.
Yeah, totally. And so one of the ships that shows up in that scene is the Excelsior 2, which I wanted to send it back to John, because that was another example of a classic ship that we're getting an upgraded version on. Can you talk a little bit about the brief there and the process?
Yeah, and also with what Brian was saying about the Borg ship, when David Blass and I had started that, we had thought, wouldn't it be cool if the Borg had Borgified a doomsday machine? And that's where the design emphasis
That's
came.
Wild.
when we're drawing it, when it first opens up, you have that goofy, funky, killing light that the doomsday machine had, and it kind of faded away, and it changed its kind of personality as the scripts changed and stuff. But
but I fought so hard to keep that glow in the center. I fought so hard to keep it in there. I asked so many times, can we just put that back in?
Yeah, but that lighting, like you were saying, it was just a remarkable thing what you did. So, but the Excelsior was very interesting, because we got a note, and we had this long-running art department entity that was an emergency through the entire design process of the Excelsior. So any given day, you'd be pulled off it to work on this emergency. Can't talk about it. At one point, everyone in the art department was on it at once, every single person, and trying to figure this thing out. And hopefully when we do this again in a year after we can talk about it. But I started doing sketches immediately. And the Enterprise E is kind of inspired by the Excelsior. A lot of things. It's one of my favorite ships, the Excelsior, and so it seemed so cool when we were doing the Sovereign to take a lot of those elements and incorporate them into the Enterprise E. And so when we're doing the new Excelsior, Terry Metalis sent a note over. And he goes, it looks a little bit too Excelsior to me from the original series. And I go, well, actually, it's going backwards and forwards between the two two elements. So when we talk, and he goes, oh, okay, I understand it now. And so we started doing these sketches. So I'd do a couple profiles and 3/4 views and stuff. Dave liked them, and then the emergency took place, so that would be set aside. This happened the entire design process on this. So I wound up doing 3/4 sketches, some plan views, some details of the bridge, the side of the ship angle. So I was trying to keep that Excelsior in line with the original, yet retrofitted, of course, and make it more TNG era. Sean Hargraves was on the show with us at this time. He did the Enterprise from the last J.J. Abrams movie.
He did the Enterprise.
And so he was tasked with making rough 3D models of it. Same thing. He got pulled off of it to work on this other project. And so he wound up doing that and moving on to some other things. And Doug Drexler said, I will do this at home after work. He goes, I'd really like to do this. So I gave him a handful of sketches of all the things. And so he took those and turned them Drexler style into the Excelsior you saw on the screen. And it was fun to watch this thing because I'd get some of his models and Dave would go, okay, sneak this into the side. I want you to do a quick color pass on it. So a little bit together, but not like the Stargazer. And then seeing it on the screen is like, oh my gosh, how fun to have that task of working on a favorite ship of all time. And so I was hoping we would have gotten to Grissom and then it would have been like a full circle of super artistic joy. But it's fun to see the Excelsior come back and in a new way. And so my hat's off to all you guys, just making that look so stinking cool. So
yeah, we're chomping at the bit to bring that into Star Trek Online soon. I'm looking forward to that. We actually just did the Sagan that just went into STO recently, and players were really excited to get their hands on that. And any of these 25th century Starfleet ships, people really responded well to them. So we're grateful on STO that to have new stuff to make, right? Star Trek Online started in 2010, and then for a long time before Discovery, we did all the canon stuff we could do, and then sort of just kind of kept having to make up new stuff, and so it's a relief to have new canon things to work with, and also to be
you made
feeding
good
back
stuff.
Into it. Yeah,
you made good stuff. I love me a Gagarin class.
Oh, thanks.
I really love that ship.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments was when Dave brought in Bill Krause, who did a lot of the actual printed model stuff, and when we had that first Zoom meeting, and I have never seen anyone hold back super excited enthusiasm. I could tell you were just wanting to scream your head off. I'm on the movie, the TV.
Right, yeah.
And you held it together so well.
Thanks. Yeah, it was really difficult.
so that was my most favorite days.
I mean, I think I have it somewhere. My copy of the Star Trek the Movie sketchbook that has Generations and First Contact sketches, that a lot of them that you did, John. I wore that thing down. Like it's in pieces now because I read it so much. So to be on an actual work call with you was just a childhood dream come true, frankly. So I'm very grateful.
Best?
Yeah.
Isn't that the best? There's so many times when all of us were just excited about getting to meet somebody or work with somebody in second and third seasons. Is just an amazing experience.
Well, and Andrew, and you said you got to take Elkar's lessons from Mike Okuda. Holy crap, man.
The only thing that we didn't miss was Greg Jean was going to hopefully get on the show, and his health wasn't good. Sadly, he passed away in the middle of it, and at the end we named a ship after him. But he goes back to the motion picture, and he was the biggest original series fan. And if it wasn't for his kind of love and fandom of that series, and what he has shared with everybody in multiple ways, I don't think Star Trek would be what it is today without his influence and what he did on the show. So in all things, I think Greg Jean, he's in the show, all the shows in spirit. So it's fun, and meeting him, like you said, was like a dream come true for me. So it's amazing how many of our favorite heroes we get to meet on these shows. So
yeah. Did you want to say something, Andrew, about?
Yeah. I was thinking about when I was talking about the original design of 25th century Elcars. I had one of your renders up, or actually, well, not the original if you go back to season 1, but during that look development phase for season 2 and 3, I have one of your renders up of the Andromeda class. Because I just I don't know. I've heard people describe the current Elcars as blue, and I was like, oh, people are reading that gray as blue, but it really was intended to be mostly gray interface, tops of that reddish orange, because I think that that first of all, Picard himself is a very reserved personality, and stargazer. I said, well, it should almost have his personality. Like this is him
Interesting. Yeah.
personified, right? And also because I think that very much the audience color codes the races, in their minds by the colors of the ships. I know I do it. You've got like that sort of like oranginess for Cardassians and maroon for Vulcan and green for Romulan, and Federation is very much gray. I mean, that's how we color code it in our minds. And so I said, well, why not make an interface that's actually gray? Not only will it work well with that color coding, but it also works well, I think, with the tone in terms of that this is the first sort of like, I don't know, I heard one of CBS's like advertisements describe it as an adult drama of Star Trek. I was, oh, cool. Well, yeah, if that's what we're going for, let's do something that's a little more serious. But finding that, so I started looking at ships. And one of the ships I like the most, I thought had such a nice subtlety of the juxtaposition of large, sort of sweeping areas of low density and areas of high frequency detail. That really that juxtaposition of a large area that with low density and then those areas of high frequency details, I thought that's nailing it. Like that's nailing that ratio perfectly in terms of like how high tech I want it to look. So the Andromeda class did sort of enter into that.
Thanks. That's really cool to hear. Well, and thanks for sharing that. I want to pass it around if anybody has any other stories they want to share quickly. We're about out of time, and I certainly really thank you for taking the time today, and John especially for joining us twice. But it's been a ton of fun. So why don't we start with you, Brian? If there's anything else you wanted to share with the audience before we take off.
I mean, I was just thinking about bringing it a little bit back down to the Picard ship design part of it is that we have such love for these ships and we're really always trying to think of, again, what's the most dramatic, but also like you talked about in one of your earlier panels on what makes a Starfleet ship, and the point where it all kind of clicks together and you hear that music in your head and that that's the Starfleet ship. You've done it, Thomas, when you mentioned that. Yeah. I mean, it's a similar process when we see it in shots finally with the, we watch it a million times in previs and then blocking and then lighting and stuff. And when you see it finally in those shots, when the DI's done the final color correction and you've got the new soundtrack on top of it, when it works, you absolutely know it works. And it's a little electric feeling that this new hero ship, if you're lucky to be able to work on it, heck, even a background ship for that matter, when it hits it all together with the music and everything else, you can't help but be excited about it. And that's, those are those moments that we all live for. And we're lucky that we've had so many opportunities in season 2 and 3 to do that sort of thing, especially with ships. And, we're handed, like I said, we're handed this great history. We get to work on it a little bit and hopefully take it a little bit forward and push it a little bit, hopefully not screw it up too badly so that we can hand it on to the next group of people that'll take it forward and take it to, the next generation of people working on Star Trek. If I can do a half pun in there.
It's all those late nights worth it.
Yeah. What about you, John? Anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, it's funny what Brian had mentioned is the music on top of things, and that adds the voice to the ships that don't make a sound. And I remember Jerry Goldsmith was like the king of doing themes for everyone and everything. And I remember watching his movies as a kid. The Enterprise had its theme. The Space Dock had a theme. Epsilon 9 had a theme. And he did that with every single movie. And that was like the magical element that gave the ships and the CG and the miniatures and stuff their voice. And I have to say that it carries on with seasons 2 and 3. to hear those things. And also season 1 with the rhyming and playing the old theme from the original series. It adds so much more than just a visual. And so I have to say that is one of the coolest things. Definitely the two mixed together are just complete magic. So
because it's such a giant team effort. It's a giant
Right.
team effort from initial page down to the last person that touches it on its way out.
Yeah.
exactly.
And we want to thank again Craig Huxley and his daughter Fiona for joining us at the top of the day. That's so cool to see the blaster beam in action like that. I had no idea.
Speaking of sound effect that you will completely remember for the rest of your life after you
Right.
hear it on the big screen.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was so cool. I'd never actually seen it being played before. I had no idea what to expect, and it was wild. So Andrew, anything else you wanted to say real quick?
Just so honored to be on a panel with all these talented people. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The honor is all mine for sure. Thank you all again so much for joining us today and for being a part of Fleet Week. Thanks again for I'm getting a little emotional for all of our content creators and streamers and STO players for being part of an amazing community and really rallying around this idea of celebrating Star Trek ships. They're a special part of the franchise for so many of us, and it's great to see everybody just latch onto that and really enjoy it this week. We've had a great time. Thanks, Mike, for running tech all day. I really appreciate you carving that time out and also managing the panel on Tuesday night. And it's been such a blessing to really just have fun and shoot the ship with everybody. I had to put that in there one last time. So I think we're gonna raid one final Fleet Week streamer, but this is gonna do it for the week. Live long and prosper, everybody, and we'll see you out there and that away.
Thank you.
Thanks.